So I wanted to start off this video series by just offering some general step one advice. And I'll preface this by saying that you're going to hear a lot of advice from a lot of different people throughout your first 2 years. And given the fact that I'm now making a video on general step one advice, I am now no exception to that rule. So the first piece of advice that I want to offer is to simply aim high. And you want to aim high because you simply just want to do as well as you can. I don't believe that you should be satisfied with just getting by and passing step and getting an average of about 230, 231, 232. Because let's say that initially maybe you want to do something that's not particularly competitive. And later on down the line, you decide, oh, I want to do maybe orthopedics or urology or plastic surgery, whatever, something that's a little bit more competitive. And if you were so satisfied with getting an average on your step exam, you have essentially made your life a whole lot more difficult to try and get into that residency. And this is unfortunately a reality and something that I have seen in my class. I have run into people who have said, I wanted to do neurosurgery, but unfortunately I didn't do very well on my step exam. However, I am in no means speaking in absolutes here. I am simply saying that scoring lower on your step exam will just make your life a whole lot more challenging. You can still get into competitive residencies even with a suboptimal step score, but it's just a lot more difficult. As I was talking to my clinical advisor, he revealed to me that there are just some programs that set arbitrary cutoffs for step exams because they have too many applicants and they just need to set the bar somewhere to filter through all the applicants. So it's in your best interest to aim high. The second piece of advice that I want to offer is that this exam is completely doable. It is fully within your reach to do well, and I kind of want to demystify the test itself. I would encourage you to take advice from people who are genuine and also advice from people who have something to offer you beyond the generic advice that you'll receive from most of your classmates. You shouldn't be listening to people who have no productive advice for you. You have methods at your disposal that will allow you to prepare for this exam. And keep in mind that advice comes with a score. I scored over the 95th percentile on this exam, so I feel as if the methods that I used to study for this exam are incredibly valid methods and readily applicable to others as well. I studied a lot for this exam, and it paid off just because I did the hard work. The third piece of advice that I want to offer is that you should master the fundamentals as you progress through your preclinical years. A lot of this information is going to be foundational for a lot of the problems that you're going to encounter on your step exam. Your step exam is a thinking exam, and it's based off of the knowledge that you receive in your first 2 years, specifically a lot of foundational material, and it's testing whether or not you've mastered that material and you're able to apply it to a clinical scenario. So the fourth piece of advice that I want to offer is that you should focus on mastery of material using a limited amount of resources. There are a lot of resources out there for you to use. Some are just inherently better than others. And if you focus on using the resources that are well received within the medical community, the medical student community, you'll also likely do very well on your exam. And these are resources that you've already heard of, and they include UWorld, Pathoma, and Sketchy. First aid I haven't listed here just because everybody uses it, so I'm expecting that you're going to use it as well. But first aid, it just contains a lot of basic information that you should know. It's a good guideline for what you should know on STEP. And I won't really go into too much detail about first aid here in this video, but if you want me to make a video on first aid in particular, I will. UWorld is probably your most useful question bank simply because it mimics the actual STEP exam pretty closely. The way that I utilized UWorld was I saved it until my dedicated study period, and I actually didn't go through it twice. You may hear from some people that you should go through UWorld twice, but I didn't use UWorld twice simply because I remember questions that I've already come across. And the way that I utilized question banks, though, particularly UWorld, is that I would always use them on random mode, because your exam is going to be random anyway. And if you're going through your question bank for the first time and you set it up, say you want to do all of cardiology, you are inherently biasing yourself in a way when you're answering those questions because you know that that question is going to be somewhat related to the heart. So in my mind, the only effective way to actually use a question bank is to do it on random. Pathoma was an integral part to learning pathology for me. And I don't actually know anybody in my class who didn't use Pathoma because it was that valuable of a resource. Dr. Sitar, he arranges pathology in a memorable way and he focuses on a lot of the high yield material that you need to know moving forward. So knowing this book in and out was integral to me doing well on this exam. I've also listed Sketchy here as a resource, and I can't speak for Sketchy Path or Sketchy Farm simply because I didn't utilize those, but I can say that Sketchy Micro was incredibly useful for me during my second year. It helped me learn pretty much all the little details about the bugs, and the sketches are memorable, and I've utilized that information even moving into my third year. A lot of the micro that I use on a daily basis is actually stuff that I've recalled from Sketchy, believe it or not. A debatable resource that you can use is Golian Audio. I was one of the few people who did use Golian Audio. So Dr. Edward Golian, he is a pathologist as well, and kind of an old school one at that. And people say that it's kind of an outdated resource. But first off, he's a hilarious person, and secondly, he has a way of describing pathology that makes it very memorable. So for me, utilizing Pathoma and Golian Audio jointly allowed me to learn pathology, I think, to a much better degree than simply using one resource versus the other. The fifth piece of advice I would offer is that you want to favor active over passive learning and understanding. And with that, I don't want you to memorize anything that isn't worth understanding, because if you're able to just understand something fundamentally, you're able to apply it to multiple clinical scenarios rather than, say, memorizing a particular aspect of a particular detail and being unable to apply it further in any amount or any capacity. An area that really sticks out in my mind is learning about all the maneuvers to bring out different cardiac murmurs, and also just learning about the Frank-Starling curves, understanding those. And if you understand them, you'll be able to apply them to clinical scenarios, you'll be able to talk about them when you're on rounds, and it ultimately becomes second nature if you understand something rather than memorize something. And the last piece of advice that I have to offer is that if you have a weakness, identify the weakness, and then target those weaknesses early. Because if you have a particular weakness in something, you're going to have to work on that particular subject a little longer than you generally would. So the time that you've been given to study for your STEP exam might not necessarily be enough time to master your weaknesses, as well as all of the other amount of knowledge that you need to accumulate to apply to this exam. So that's it for my general Step 1 advice. I would ask that you consider maybe checking out some of my biochemistry videos, considering that this is what this video series is about. And even if you're okay with biochemistry and you don't need to view any other resources for that, consider forwarding it on to somebody who might need some biochemistry help. And also consider donating to my GoFundMe page. I do all these videos for free, and any amount of revenue would actually help me turn out videos faster. So that's all the general step advice that I have right now. I appreciate you listening in, and best of luck in the future.